Okay, so today Rafael will talk to us a bit about some of the work he's been doing. So Rafael came here in June, I believe, shortly after earning his PhD in Germany. He works with remote sensing to measure and describe woody habitat in riparian areas. And I think today he'll be giving us kind of a two-part seminar, a little bit on what he's done in his PhD and a bit on what he's been working on here. Take it away. You are muted.
That's it. So hello, everybody. Good afternoon. And yeah, I'm Rafael. Thanks for the introduction, Hava. And I'm working with Professor Lindsay Hutley here at CDU. And I also have two supervisors in CSIRO, which are Sean Levick and Tanya Dudi. And yeah, that was a fresh start in June this year. Now the slides are not going, but soon. So today I'll first introduce you to the world of tree structure and function through LiDAR technology, which is pretty much what I developed during my doctoral studies. And secondly, I'll talk about assessing the riparian vegetation using LiDAR remote sensing. And I also would like to pay my respects to the Larakia people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also acknowledge all First Nation people across the lands on which we live and work, and pay my respects to elders both past and present. So this thing about exploring tree structure is actually not a new thing. We have had many artists dealing with that in different ways. And that's my favorite, Gustav Klimt, an Austrian painter from the early 20s, and the Tree of Life. While in Deriving, I was cycling around, also in the night, full moon, and you actually realize some nice situations every now and then, which are the very diverse tree structures that are around in the Northern Territory. But in fact, we have now technologies to perceive that structural differences. And here now you are introduced to 4 different point clouds. So if my talk is not that worth, at least you saw 4 nice point clouds derived from, on the left, terrestrial LiDAR platforms. The upper corner on the right, it's mobile laser scanning. And on the bottom on the right, it's from drone-based LiDAR. So you can see it's different. They were also slightly processed in different ways, but the information we can extract from that will be different because of this interaction of LiDAR sensors and vegetation types. Yeah. So what is LiDAR? In fact, it's light detection and ranging. We have a sensor that emits light in the form of laser pulses. And once a surface is found, then it reflects back the signal, which is recorded, producing a data that's like 3 columns, X, Y, Z, a local coordinate system. We can call them images and snapshots, sorry. And they are also non-destructive. So we actually don't have to remove vegetation to produce this data. It's when we talk about terrestrial LiDAR, so we understand pretty much the sensor being mounted on a tripod, and we also refer to as TLS, terrestrial laser scanning, which is an acronym often used. What we know specifically about terrestrial LiDAR, it's that since the 2000s, we have commercial sensors being sold, and then like it still has the highest resolution, so the highest point cloud density among other LiDAR sensors and platforms combinations. It has been used for forest mensuration and deriving tree attributes, and it's at the moment the best for deriving tree volume. Also, we know that this type of technology has not yet covered many locations in the world, and also not different systems like forest plantations, different agroforestry systems, which have a high structural diversity. So here again, you can see a figure, and LiDAR happens with different capabilities in different platforms, and also is spread on a spatial extent from ground to near ground, airborne and spaceborne LiDAR. And during my PhD, I just worked with terrestrial LiDAR. And sorry, and it's pretty much like that. You have different companies, you have different softwares that come together to process that information and extract point clouds so that you can extract information. We have two sampling protocols, which one is based on single trees, which we target a certain tree and then we design the sampling on it. It works like that. You have a tree in the middle, then you have first position, second, third, and so forth, that you really make sure you're gonna cover all the surface of a certain body in the physical space. So we always talk about trees. You should scan the tree at least from 3 or 4 scanning positions, but if you need more details, because it's a complex crown, so you might need more scanning positions. When dealing with forest resources, then we normally go for a grid approach, where we say like, we're gonna scan every 20 meters. And now the dark holes are the positions where the terrestrial LiDAR was placed. And then that's the effect once I'm manipulating the points over distance, as you see here, the range filter. So basically, that's explaining also how this information is bound together, and we are subject to errors eventually from the software that we are dealing with. So this means we have to co-register, put all the point clouds in the same coordinate system. Yeah, so the further you go from a position, the more you're gonna get from tree tops, from neighboring trees. And then what I have done often is using geometrical modeling to retrieve information from individual 3-point clouds, what you see in the middle. And the standard method today, I would say, to forest resources is 3QSM, which quantitative structure models are the general term for this type of geometrical modeling. What happens is basically from an individual 3-point cloud, we're gonna have cylinders fitted to the small patches of the individual 3-point cloud. And so you reconstruct the whole structure in different orders of branches, as you see now in the different colors. With that, we gain a lot of possibilities which go through volumetric properties, but also geometrical properties, and then topological. So how are things connected in the space? And from that, we earn a lot of 3 parameters, many of them which are hard to measure on the field. For example, the different crown dimensions, the branch volume, the stem volume, and we derive a lot of information because we can reclassify the cylinders accordingly to achieve something. So the basic workflow is producing project point clouds, extracting individual trees, fitting geometrical QSMs, the cylinder trees, and then we're gonna have woody volume, which is converted to biomass and carbon. But then you can also develop algorithms on the top of this quantified structure to study something. And so, just a second. So I put this structural analysis and functional analysis in the context of agroforestry systems, which are combinations of trees with agricultural crops or livestock. And the background was basically, we are, since November last year, we are over 8 billion people. We have industrialized agriculture. which is not sustainable, highly dependent on external inputs. And we have climate change shaping and increasing uncertainty. But we do have agroforestry systems like we saw last week or few weeks ago in Sri Lanka, and worldwide there are efforts on producing more sustainable agriculture. And now, knowing a lot of the tree structure, we can also derive information on the many aspects related to crops, tree and crops interaction, tree and livestock. And so here, previously, there was this simplicity of understanding the tree structure, but in fact, things are a bit more complicated. And from that structure, we have many functions, ecosystem functions that can be realized. They are provisioning, regulating, supporting, and cultural functions, which when used by mankind, they are translated to ecosystems, goods, and services. And finally, I mean, you might know the idea of agroforestry systems already. We have woody perennials that will be combined with crops or livestock, and there are high structural complexity in all these systems. But in fact, like one important thing would be to understand better the tree shading effects. So because crops might produce better outputs under certain shade, and also they might be more resilient to climate change with certain degree of shade. There was the inspiration, the motivation, that in fact you see that if I would fit a circle, a cone, or a ellipsoid to represent the tree crown, it wouldn't make sense. And in fact, you see the shading effects is really organized by the distribution of the woody body and the leaves. And so in my first study, we developed an algorithm to add leaves on the top of these cylinder trees. And also we had already a shadow model, which was working with similar geometrical forms to derive the shading effect of trees in a precise way. So there was a whole assessment of leaves and then creating this algorithm, then adjusting it to the shadow model to forecast the shade in different times of the day. And we added also data on solar radiation, and to derive this kind of insolation reduction maps on 3D space, spatially explicit. Yeah? So here there was the comparison. Does that make sense? Use realistic 3D models of real trees to simulate and quantify the shade effects of trees. And in fact, in this study, it was proved worth. So we have the situation with realistic leaves. We had higher insolation reduction, and also though the shading pattern was similar among the different treatments with no leaves and alternative approach to estimate this shading effect. So it was worth, and also using a 2D, two-dimensional method, which is hemispherical photography, commonly used. It proved also to be considerably different. That's pretty much what I said in numbers, and we don't need to go through it. In fact, then we realize a potential. Imagine we are dealing with forest resources, with trees, and then we're gonna, in a European perspective, especially in Germany, you want to produce high quality timber, and therefore, along the lifespan of a tree, we're gonna prune the branches in a certain way, in a certain fashion, to have quality. But in the context of agroforestry, it means way more, because we are managing the shading effects and eventually the nutrient cycling and humidity in the soil. So here I developed virtual pruning systems where, starting from the cylinder, from the structure of a real tree, we simulated scenarios for pruning the trees. And then in different intensities, following a conventional pruning treatment where you remove branches until a certain height, and then a selective pruning system where you remove branches throughout the tree. So ideally they would have There are different strategies to produce high quality timber. However, they will have different shading effects. So here you see the control treatment on the left, and then up the selective pruning treatment and low the conventional pruning. And they behave totally different at an individual tree level. So you can kind of imagine what would happen with the whole forest stand or agroforestry system. On the top, I have produced a third paper, which was dealing then with the production capacity of trees. Was basically now with these virtual pruning systems, they could also become branch harvesting strategies. So what if we now have forest resources that we don't want to cut down the trees, but just eventually we need biomass, or we want to manage light? How much will be produced if we use different ways of cutting branches? So that was the inspiration. You already saw the point cloud before, but that was a study with a silvopastoral system. So trees and livestock on the ground grazing in Namibia. And then like before, I've introduced these virtual pruning systems, which are branch harvesting simulations now. And by organizing all the cylinders, and I could also talk about wood assortments that could be produced from that harvesting, and also how much labor would be required. So in fact, you see five different treatments in terms of harvesting yield, and was basically in one, I'm gonna prune all the trees until 3 meters in height, and the other, like I'll remove big branches with 7 centimeters cross section, while the other will remove any branch with bigger than 2 centimeters, for example. And that way we can judge how much is gonna be produced, how much would remain on the field as a vegetative structure, and how much it would imply on, you know, operational efforts to get rid of that. So in finalizing, it was pretty much about deriving information on point clouds produced by terrestrial LiDAR. And then there was this leaf creation algorithm, which proved to be very useful also if you want to derive information on the foliage of trees, like leaf area index. And then the shadow model, so assessing the insolation reduction. And finally, like producing structural alterations to trees. So in managed systems where we are dealing with woody resources, it would make sense to use these approaches. So that was the first session. I'm happy to take any quick question if you have.
With your fitting cylinders. Thanks. Well, thanks for the presentation first. That was a good introduction. With fitting your cylinders, I imagine that works quite well when you've got plantation wood. Do you have a feeling how accurate or how well that works if you've got a natural growth system where you've got way more irregular shapes?
Yeah. Oh, it works. The key is the data quality. So it's how you're gonna sample. So if you increase your sampling efforts with the terrestrial LiDAR on the field, and then you're gonna get different structures. However, yeah, there are limitations. For example, bifurcated trees are not working very well. And there are like 9 model assumptions. So if you violate any of them, your results are very likely to be crap.
Do you have a feeling whether that's then a bias towards smaller volumes or towards larger volumes? Or is that just totally depending?
It always depends on, you know, this combination of sensor, sampling strategy, and the size of the trees. Because like we won't cover all the branches from bigger trees. And in fact, I forgot to mention, but these results, the first 2 papers, they were produced for European trees, and they were leafless when I scanned, which, you know, it's amazing because you don't have all these obstacles from the foliage, so you get all the branches. So there is a limitation.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Rafael. It's incredible technology and amazing data that you can obviously get from this. I'm just curious how long it takes to actually get that data, say for one tree or a patch in the environment. I'm just curious to know what the timeframes are around that. And yeah.
No, that's a good point, because in fact, it takes a while.
Yeah.
So like for 1-2 trees, it's quite kind of quick. But if you're gonna do for 1 hectare of forest, that's a headache. That's like maybe 2-3 months of segmenting trees. Now, of course, in complex vegetation systems with a lot of crown overlapping, it's a nightmare. However, I'll answer the next part of this question with the next slides. But let's say for 100 trees, processing and fitting the cylinders can take like 2, 3, 4, 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, my question is sort of related to that, which is, I know the answer is that it depends, but say if you had a 20-meter high tree, I'm just trying to get a feeling for how many points typically represents a typical tree. I guess, are we talking millions, thousands? I'm just trying to get my head around it.
Yeah, so if you use this sampling strategy, focusing on a tree with, I will guess, 27 meters, then will depend on the foliage conditions and the branchiness, and then the sensor you have and how many scans. But let's talk about a minimum of 1 million points, but very likely 50 million. And then could be 200 million also, depending how you.
No, that's exactly the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rafael. That was a very, very illustrative. I've never understood what LiDAR is, so this has been a very good one. So thank you.
Mission accomplished.
Yes, mission accomplished for the former marine biologists learning about LiDAR. Anyway, my question is more on the impact. You were talking about pruning of the plants. Is there any impact on the silviculture part, like animals? Do they go fatter? Are they happier? Do they tend to sit around where the areas where these trees have been pruned? Yeah. What is the impact of the pruning of the trees in the condition of the bottom part of the environment, and whether there's any decisive information on whether there's a higher increase in capital gains or decrease in capital gains or cash crops or something?
Yeah. So let's imagine this silvipastoral system where you have trees and livestock, sheep or cows. And in fact, if you go to Brazil or many places dealing with trees and game, like it's clear that they like shade. No? They're gonna eat more, they're gonna chill more, so they are happy, they're gonna reproduce more. And if you think about designing agroforestry system in general, and you're gonna mechanize it at some extent, you're gonna have to remove the branches in the first 3-4 meters. So, and then on the other side, it's very likely that if you keep more branches in different levels, yeah, so you don't prune the lower areas of the trunk, you're gonna have more biodiversity because you have all these bird species that like sometimes to be on the grass and then escalating on the trees and, you know, keep things low. Yeah, many of the small birds in Brazil at least. And yeah, then I'm not a bird specialist, but I believe it.
There will be an increase in biodiversity. All right, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not holding you back because you have to move on. Just a quick one that you mentioned, Rafael. It's really a nice thing that you pointed to contribution, that is provisioning services. Do you think, I'm just wanting to know how this mechanism, this framework, or it contributes decision support system. For example, the forest owners, obviously Europe, they have got, in Germany, in Sweden, almost 300,000 private forest owners. So do you think it really is scalable to their level to understand?
Yeah.
Just
So it's getting there, and then that goes a lot towards the direction from the previous question from Keller, and then I show you some more, and then we can talk later. But in fact, imagine one day you're gonna take a picture. You're gonna take a LiDAR scan with one button, then you derive the information, and then you can take the decision, like the pruning systems for agricultural practitioners, and then still there is a path to go. But I think definitely if you are a farmer now with 200 hectares, having the same agroforestry system in the same condition, that would be a nice information to have now. Like, I want to keep the trees, but I want to produce goods, and so.
We have one more question from online.
All right.
Quickly is, can you use this to assess the height of trees in a forest?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's one of the basic parameters that's derived. So I'll continue with the project outlines for my LiDAR remote sensing of riparian vegetation project. And it goes from June this year until June 2026. And basically the aims here are to have a better understanding the linkages between vegetation structure and function, but now in terms of savanna riparian zones. So we're gonna talk about water use from trees and vegetation, and also the three-dimensional arrangement of the woody vegetation, as you saw before, but also if we could sense responses to water availability in different systems, ecosystems, and then thinking from tree to plot and then landscape level. A few weeks ago, we had my supervisor giving a talk here. She was talking about groundwater dependent ecosystems. That's maybe a better terminology for riparian vegetation in the case of our project, because we are dealing with any tree and vegetation in general that's dependent on groundwater, and riparian is just like the corner of it. So for this first year, it's pretty much my efforts were towards like using the different LiDAR sensors that we got in CS-IRO, and then we are focusing the efforts now a lot on drone LiDAR and then the terrestrial LiDAR for extracting tree information, and so also defining the study locations. For the second year, I want to explore more the possibilities on examining the foliage conditions of trees, and then also the understory, like assessing coarse woody debris and the regeneration, tree regeneration. So for the third year, we kind of want to upscale from tree to plot to landscape level using some hydrological modeling efforts, and then also derive solutions for future extraction in 3D data. So my potential study locations at the moment are the Territorial Wildlife Park, the wetlands with paper barks. We also have the Education Creek, where some colleagues here in CDU are developing some studies related to the water that's in Litchfield. We have also Mataranka, which I don't know yet, I haven't been there. And we do have some sites in Adelaide because they have long-term monitoring of evapotranspiration and sap flow measurements. So I like to say linear structures for the Northern Territory. What I saw, it's actually you get a creek with 2 meters wide, and then you have some kind of lines of trees growing around this intermittent water body. Eventually, they also spread. So you can easily see here's a wetland and it's green, though it's the dry season. And well, I didn't have that good pictures, but they look like this. And well, the water body, few trees around, but they are always green, though the vegetation is all dry. That's the Territorial Wildlife Park. There are some plots experimenting different fire regimes, but also you see a great part dependent on groundwater. And so keeping themselves green, and that's the paper bark mainly. Few of the tools I have been using. So you are well aware of terrestrial LiDAR on the tripod, and eventually we put it on a car in places where there are roads, and we can scan from the edges. That's kind of quick and comfortable because we stay in the aircon. And however, the point cloud quality won't cover perhaps all the requirements for extracting the volumetric information of trees. We do have the back impact LiDAR, which is a mobile system. So that's me and my supervisor putting it in my back, and then I'm walking around with that in the forest. Of course, if it's the understory is too crowded or the trees have too many branches, things are complicated. And finally, we have this fancy drone, which is expensive in a way and requires a lot of efforts to operate it, but it's giving nice results. So without extending too much, the standard has been 3QSM, and that also helps answering Keller's question, and Ronio also to you. CSIRO, some colleagues there have developed already an alternative method, which is called ray cloud tools. So basically what they do these cylinder trees in large scale, and you feed the point cloud, they're gonna cut down the trees, segment it, that's the proper word, and then feed cylinders. And it was released in 2021. Now I have been active with these guys to update some things and increase the functionality so that we really have quick and reliable tree information, but also plot level information. And you get each color for one of these extracted trees from which we can derive information. So that was a great achievement now from this month that we are producing in few hours or one day too. We can process one hectare like this, and you have 900 trees extracted. It's barely perfect. They don't have ground points anymore. So they still miss some things every now and then. So these are the leftovers from the segmentation. But you see many types of tree structures. And there are errors. For example, this is got the branch from a neighboring tree. But then we have to compare the methods. So in purple is this new tool, which is quick. And then in orange, we're gonna have the standard method, 3QSM, while the rest is the point cloud. Still, this was not optimized, it's just a demonstration. It's better. And of course, when plotting things, you can always manipulate the data to look better, smoothing things. So there was no smoothing here, apart of this guy. That's the first challenge. And why would we want to still use the two methods? Like, because 3QSM produces a lot of information, and that's an advantage if we want to translate that to, to tree-water relationships, but also how much is of the precipitation is going through the stem, and how much is true fall, how much is going to be transpiration, evapotranspiration, and so forth. So that's the second hurdle, the terrestrial LiDAR in blue, and then the drone LiDAR data in yellow. Of course, that was already filtered in a way, the blue one, but you easily see that terrestrial LiDAR can give you the most precise information on tiny branches, while the drone still, though that was the highest resolution we could achieve with the drone, it's still not perfect. Segmentation problems. So while this new tool is capable of snipping out 3-point clouds so that we can process it in 1 week instead of, well, 1 hectare for 1 week and not 6 months. It still has some errors. Here is the case of more complex tree structure. So the algorithm cannot know if that's 1 tree or 2. And then it segments incorrectly when you have terrestrial LiDAR and drone LiDAR. And then in the middle, it's like the overlapping. There was also a lot of effort put now on matching the different data sets, because in white is one data source, so either the drone or the TLS, and then in colors the other. So because we kind of lose the information on the location of trees during the process, but now the software has been updated and it's amazing. We want to explore the foliage conditions, and here's another insight. I mean, it's basically playing with the reflectance values from the point cloud when you deal with terrestrial LiDAR. And with that, we kind of can get rid of foliage points and just have the woody structure, which for modeling woody volume is perfect. There are several methods for that. However, this is an opportunity independent of algorithms. Non-published data from South Africa windbreak, where they were exposed to drought stress, so the treetops were dying. And then I expect to derive such information here for the different groundwater dependent ecosystems. And eventually, you know, if there were alterations on the water level from the ground, and trees are reacting over time. Identifying standing dead trees, you know, they would have totally different behavior. That's also manageable now. I think nobody has done that. We are supposed to do it. Just a way of identifying how can you classify the trees, say like this one is dead because it has no foliage, or, you know, could be a crucial information. Understory conditions, regeneration, dead wood lie on the ground. And then I'm trying out things to extract information, like if that's lying dead wood, it's also a tree. Would I be able to derive the volumetric information with the cylinder algorithm, but didn't work. So more to come. That's again the understory of a forest system, pre-classified, but would be nice to know how many branches are lying on the ground, how many seedlings are growing, and, you know, termite mounds also might be there. Rocks, they could all be useful information, ecological information. So just zooming in, a few of the structures left behind in this type of data after extracting the trees. All right, guys, and that was it for today. These were my expectations, in fact, when I applied for the job, that I would be going around with the boat and using the laser from distance and feeding the crocodiles with chicken. And yeah, thanks a lot. Has been raining today, and then, you know, dancing trees, go. So I'm happy to take any other questions if you have.
We have, we have another one online. Can you easily assess canopy cover, say of different restoration plots? Well,
Canopy cover, there would be different paths to do that. Not exactly how I was doing, however, is related in a way. So yeah, there are methods which I'm not yet applying.
I have 2 questions that are kind of related. So first of all, I don't quite understand the backpack method, where you put it in your back. Is it like you're walking and it's scanning all the time, or like you walk and then you stop and it scans, then you walk again, you stop and it scans. And when would you prefer to do the backpack method against the tripod?
Yeah. So we assume today the terrestrial LiDAR in the tripod is the most precise, and you can get more detail from it because it's static, and it has particular properties like the reflectance behavior of the points is amazing. But then here is the back impact LiDAR, and now it's not going, but let's do like this. Oh yeah. So difficult to see, but here different ground points where it's with many points, it's totally blue. The person was able to walk around, and where not, as you're seeing, the less of the ground. So in hydrological studies, it would be nice to have the digital terrain model, the EM or DTM. And for example, you would have to walk around. It's a lot of effort. You get tired, you get injured. And here, the vegetation was very dense. What information can you get? It's probably the stem count and hopefully the diameter at breast height of trees. But as you see, now it's bad time, but it's gonna come again. You don't get the tree tops. They are not precise enough. You don't get branch information. And these would be like the thoughts you must have when deciding for each LiDAR sensor you want to go and what sampling design you're going to have, sampling effort. And yeah, what was the next question, or did I answer already?
I want to know if you have to stop each time for it to scan.
Yeah.
Or if it's just constantly scanning.
Yeah, so ideally you should be walking on the same speed, because then it makes life easier for the algorithms to process and put together all this information on the point location.
But so it's all the time going.
Yeah, yeah. So you could hold it on your hand. Also, it's designed in a way that it won't get here, so it get this view. Yeah.
So, Raf, a lot of the talk was sort of geared, or seemingly at least, geared towards sort of the high end. This is where we're going. This is what we can do. I've spent a lot of the last couple of weeks talking about model complexity in a different context, but about in some cases you do need the big fancy thing, and in some cases a quicker, dirtier model is just fine, and it's the processing time that's a factor. Does that apply here, where you're trying to do things as best and as rigorous as you can, but in some situations it's the 50 million points is not needed, and you can just sort of crunch out the output?
Yeah, so there are different ways to answer to your question. Well, let's start from this point thing. So normally you're gonna downsample the point clouds, and yeah, like if you work already in 2 centimeter scales, you get rid of many of the points, especially when dealing with terrestrial LiDAR. But I like to work depending on the scenarios, like individual trees or plot level assessment, and then with foliage or without foliage. What's the thing? You can work with 2 millimeters downsampling, so you get 1 point every 2 millimeters. But for forest resources and the way things have been done in the last 6-7 years, normally they have worked with the 2 centimeters downsampling strategy. And yeah, it's also one of the model assumptions required for the cylinders. It's kind of to make things even. Yeah. But then the other way of answering your question would be like, yeah, you need a big scale, medium scale, small scale. And then the way we are proceeding in this project is actually, you don't have many trees with sap flow measurements, right? And if we have sites with all the systems installed to monitor the evapotranspiration, also we are lucky. So we can target few trees with a more sampling efforts and higher scanning resolution, and then kind of play with the point clouds to make sure we get the most of the tiny branches, and then extrapolate that to neighboring trees. And then, for example, the idea is like terrestrial LiDAR for these 10 trees with sap flow measurements and evapotranspiration assessment, whatever, and then upscale with the drone data. Like you have this tree, highest resolution, these many branches. So now other type of point cloud correlation, and then landscape correlation.
Very cool.
Yeah, so it's, but still a lot of headache, huh? Like.
You keep referring to terrestrial LiDAR. Is there a marine LiDAR?
No, in that case, he would go into the water. However, in fact, we do have some laser systems that go through the water. So normally used on airplanes. And I mean, they would call them green LiDAR because they have a different wavelength, so different light range that they are working. And like these ones is like the wavelengths are 1500, normally from 900 to 1500 nanometers. But the green LiDAR works with green light, so around 500.
To make it easy.
And then it goes through the water. So up to 30 meters in depth, you can get the ground of some riparian systems. Unfortunately, we do not have that. I was wondering about using them also, but it's also like they are eye sensitive. So you would require some permission to use that type of, because you can, you know, damage the eyes of someone.
Yeah, just building on that, because you said there's a difficulty distinguishing between leaves and the woody material.
Mm.
If you got dual wavelength, there might be a better chance to separate them out.
Or that could be the case, but you don't get terrestrial LiDAR sensors with multiple wavelengths at the moment. I mean, there are some efforts, but. And then my strategy is working, let's say 50 to 70% on the species here in the surroundings, not sure in the riparian species, but you know, just playing around with the reflectance. However, yeah, I mean, all the physics behind the laser beam, you know, it's not 100% precise, but it's an option. So might work for few eucalyptus species and others.
I got issues with different aspects of your surface that reflects. Another question I had was for your segmentation. Are you using AI algorithms for the segmentation work? Because I think that's a typical AI application.
I'm not sure. So like the Ray Cloud tools, the one from CSIRO, I'm not sure how is the process of tree segmentation. However, I think it's just based on a script. So it's just functional.
Yeah.
You know, a set of rules being applied. It's not AI. But
I think that there's a lot of potential there with AI, because that's a typical AI application where, well, typically when a human being interacts with it, you can improve things and help things guide along.
Yeah,
I reckon there's a big potential.
No, definitely all these classification things. Also, I'm trying to use eventually AI for the classifying the objects on the understory. However, I don't know how to implement it. And in fact, there are some colleagues, other institutions that are doing this type of work. However, it's very slow, you know, and then with all the sources of variation and data qualities we get, that's the part AI is not capable of dealing with it right now, but if they are trained.
But in general, that's the real advantage of AI. It can deal with these variations, and it basically interpolates between the things that you have shown it, and to some extent can extrapolate it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of work to do still in analyzing the data.
Yeah, definitely.
Capturing it is relatively simple, but extracting the information is the big challenge.
There is one more question online as well, which is pretty relevant to this current discussion. So can this technology be used in smaller plants? Can it be used, for instance, to work with like a field of cotton to assess plant architecture?
Okay, like cotton. Well, I'm not so sure how this cotton production system looks like, because I'm just aware of cottonwood, or like, yeah, trees producing cotton, that, you know, I have a clear image of the vegetation. But small trees, how small? And the problem, I have scanned some orchards in South Africa. They were lime and oranges vineyards, and especially lime and orange. What's the problem? They are 2 meters height, but very dense canopy, so you don't get much of the branch information. That's the trick part. So, and in forest conditions, it's also like everything less than 2 meters, tiny branches. If they are close to the scanner, they might be covered, but if they have too much foliage, or like seedlings from any conifer species, they are very dense needles. I'm not so sure.
So like a non-woody plant would also be.
Yeah, non-woody plants, it's more tricky, because it's really how the leaves are exposed to the laser, and then it becomes more complex. So you don't see much of LiDAR being applied for measuring grasses, and though it's a possibility, but.
Any
So,
other?
can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm online. So this is Stephen asking about this question, because do you think it's related with the technology limitation of the LiDAR? Because I think if you have the lemon trees or those things are really dense, you probably really couldn't do that. But whether that's related with the density of the LiDAR, of the laser beams, that's related to the resolution you can reach on smaller plants. Because I imagine those LiDARs you have been using is designed for forest or bigger structure rather than small structure. For the smaller structure, probably need much more dense laser to achieve that. If it's not so dense than just me.
Yeah. So I would say, in fact, they were never designed for forest resources, though one of the leading companies today, I won't mention, but it's doing a great job on that. And like grass systems could profit not from terrestrial LiDAR, because how to implement that, like how high, how tall are your grasses or, you know, seedlings? They might be from 50 centimeters to 2 meters in height. And then you still have to go with the tripod on the vegetation. And then you would get the highest resolution, but you're gonna damage the lower vegetation. And if you would do that with drones, then the thing is, if you don't have any canopy, fine. But you might miss the ground points if it's a dense vegetation. Yeah.
Yeah, so but that depends on the vegetation. For a lot of vegetables, actually, they are row by row, and there's an inter-row area. You have 1 meter cropping and a 1 meter open space, and another 1 meter cropping, another 1 meter open space. That's the general structure of that. So basically, you can just walk across the inter-row area. If the LiDAR laser can penetrate for 1 meter in a not so dense crop, so that may be able to work out.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, definitely. If you have explicit RAWs and with a high resolution terrestrial LiDAR sensor, that's gonna work. Even with the back impact LiDAR, you can produce meaningful information. And yeah.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Because if we really do the architecture study of those different cotton genetic materials, you can specifically grow them with some interspace for the LiDAR or whatever operation. Yes, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Well, thanks, Rafael. We have food and fancy out at the picnic tables if we want to continue this discussion. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody, and was really nice to be here today.